Yeah, that would be cool.
All right.
All right. And we're rolling. So, welcome to March. And this March is pretty special because we are calling it Myth Busting March.
Mhm.
This is a topic that's pretty near and dear to all of us at MTMM, because one of MTMM's main missions, and Ben, maybe you can speak a bit more to this from kind of the onset of MTMM and how it came to be. But one of the main missions, as we work with our clients and as we share information with the community, is to educate and making sure that what we are educating is true, is valid, is backed by research. There's a lot of noise out there, especially in the health and fitness and nutrition industries. And many people, listen because they're searching for a quick fix or an easy answer. And sometimes even just a little bit of knowledge can be even more damaging than not having any at all, because people tend to, latch onto those answers because they're like, okay, got my answer. Now there's something I can do about whatever problem it may be that I'm experiencing. Some common examples out there would be, carbs, gluten, sodium, all these things that at some point in time have been deemed as bad. Intermittent fasting, can you or can you not eat after dark or in the evening? Breakfasts, is it important? Is it not important? There's just so much out there. For a lot of these myths, I think that our answers tend to be the same. It depends. But knowing how frustrating that answer is, we're going to try and break it down as much as possible and kind of cover as many myths as we can so that you can try and understand how, the answers may pertain to you. And of course, if you have any further questions about anything that we do cover, we're happy to have a bit more of a chat about it. So Ben, I'll hand it over to you if you want to talk a little bit more about, how MTMM came to be and that mission itself. And also, I know that you did a little bit of an experiment on your Instagram story a little while back, asking for some, general nutrition questions. And that's kind of where we kind of thought up this theme, because there were a lot of specific myths in there that people clearly needed busting.
Yeah. I think there's quite a bit in there. And well done, Max. That was a great monologue. That was basically like, we'll wrap it up. The first 3-minute podcast you've ever done. There's a lot in that. I guess to break it down from the beginning, we first started MTMM. It really did start from a place of disdain with where the industry was in. And both Kat and I had, very personally and anecdotally gone through a lot of those experiences where you do grab a hold of one or two supposed rules and see what happens. And I think that, one of the pillars of our mission statement, which is available on our website, is that we work and strive to refute nutritional dogma and marketing, which is rife within the industry. And essentially, I think maybe a little counter to what you said, that people have a little bit of knowledge and then that can be sometimes worse than no knowledge at all, is I think the reason that is because it's not actually knowledge. It's usually, an element of marketing or a tagline or something that then gets extrapolated out incorrectly, right? The other issue we see a lot of is this wanting to universally apply specific rules of nutrition. And unless we're talking about energy balance, really there aren't a lot of real true universal, rules that apply to everyone. And so if we see that, people have friends who tried this and it worked, so why isn't it working for me? Or, every IG influencer or guru, you see like people with, big brand celebrities and followings that are doing God knows what now, but cutting this macro out, or they're not eating carbs, or they're heavily restricting, or they're doing IF. And it's like, great, that might have worked well for that person, given the context of their whole situation. But that doesn't mean that it's a universally applicable rule to the population, right? So I think, this month we're going to look to take a bit of a deep dive into the more popular ones and peripheral ones. And again, if you are listening to this and you have a few of those that you may think is knowledge or is fact, and you want to double check, please share with us so that we can talk them through. And it's not a a situation where we want to say, no, you're wrong. It's going to be a situation of saying, okay, here's the tagline of, or the gist of this particular myth. Here's where it stems from. Here's kind of where it's going, but here's actually what we see, or here's actually what we know, which might be counter to what this is suggesting. Okay. And so again, it is a little bit of, when we're looking to build positive relationships with individuals and with food and with themselves, we want to make sure that that knowledge, that empowerment, it stems from removing that ignorance and removing that kind of fear that comes with not knowing. When you don't know, you get paralyzed. You don't know which direction to take because you're so scared of moving in the wrong direction, right? So that's definitely something that we want to work our way through addressing. And yeah, that did stem. We did put Coach Claire was walking through a gym, and there was a nutrition seminar going on, and she kind of like stuck her head out to listen to what they were saying, and was very disappointed with the kind of, I guess, essentially like propaganda, like industry propaganda that was being touted as nutritional fact. And unfortunately, when you look and you see that there's someone up there who probably doesn't really understand the magnitude of what they're suggesting, and there's 20 or 30 people that are there keen to learn because they do want to take some positive steps when it comes to their diet and their health and everything else, getting that misinformation, it's really disappointing. And Claire is like, she was telling us this at the meeting, and is like, not visibly distraught, but it is so frustrating as a practitioner, because you think, it's hard enough to get people really interested to take those first steps sometimes and want to do things for their health and want to put in the effort and the application that it takes to try new things and learn and fail, continue to try and learn, and eventually get to where they want to be. And you see them in there on their day one, and you just know that they're like already being pushed down the wrong path, so to speak. And I said to Claire jokingly, like, just go up to all those people and give them your business card, and you'll hear from them in 6 weeks when that particular challenge is over, right? So
yeah.
After that incident, I put a thing out on my personal Instagram, and I was like, okay, guys, what are some of the things that we still maybe do believe, or what is nutritional information that you're not sure is real or not? Let's kind of look at it. And I was overwhelmed with how much of a response we got, which it surprised, it almost surprised me a little bit, not because I'm necessarily deluded by the level of nutritional knowledge in the community, right? But I always think that maybe what I know, I think I take for granted, the level of knowledge that we have as coaches. But I feel like, I was surprised my close friendship group hadn't potentially come and asked me these questions earlier, and it had taken some prompting. So essentially, we just wanted to put that out on a larger scale. The MTMM audience is growing, which is awesome, because for me, it's everyone that we get, that's listening to the knowledge and the facts that we're putting out there, and starting to understand this stuff, is kind of one back for the good guys. It's one less person that's going to kind of get pulled in and have their insecurities preyed upon, or have that real kind of not necessarily negative association with diet, but to try to dispel diet culture, right? And so I think that's what we want to do here, is say, okay, cool, we're growing, with our audience, and we want not just our new community members or new audience, but also our old members to be like, okay, what are the things that we still maybe believe despite all what we're saying, and let's have some concentrated effort on that this month. And hopefully with that people can take that away and start to see MTMM as a beacon for, intelligent and contextual and applicable, and safe and healthy information when it comes to nutrition and performance and health. And, bring their friends and their social circle into the community, and allow them to kind of be exposed to the messaging that we're trying to put out as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, yeah. Again, great monologue. Yeah. It still surprises me to this day too, like you were saying, that, when we have those initial consults with potential new clients, a lot of the times, they've come from previous diets or previous meal plans and things like that, where they've been so restricted and they have no idea why. They're just like, well, that food is just bad, and just have such a lack of understanding. And then when we, send them their initial program and they see all the options that they do have, they're still shocked. They're like, I can eat this? So it's, it's both motivating and demotivating at the same time, because you're like, well, this is just still so frustrating, but much, much more motivating in the sense that, okay, now we have the opportunity to educate these people, and help them understand how to fuel their body, right? It's very empowering for them, which is what keeps us going. Yeah.
And I think unfortunately, there's an element of the misinformation that comes across, even though the intention behind it is good, and so if someone's trying to, for example, explain calorie deficit, right? And they say, oh, you should watch out for maybe these primary carbohydrates, which are quite calorically dense. if someone hears that as like, oh fuck, carbs are bad, too many calories, like I think there's quite an element of that sort of, it's not just what's being said, but how it's being heard.
Right.
So I think that's something that, as we kind of post through this month, I want it to be like, not just like a, no, this is not correct, but like, okay, this is the message behind this statement. This is what's inferred, but this is actually what it means, and
lost in translation sometimes.
Yeah, I think so. And like, look, it's got a lot of clickbait too, and you only get X amount of characters to put a headline. Like, if you're looking to gain attention or to get your point across, that's essentially the breakdown in communication, right? Is that sometimes it's hard to build out ideas in a finite amount of characters that you get, right? So,
right.
We'll go Brene Brown and assume that everyone out there in our industry has the best of intentions, but we are also going to clean it up a little bit.
So do we want to go through a few of those big myths here today, and then everyone will just follow along kind of the rest of the month as we dispel more and more?
Yeah. So obviously, when we're talking about what we're doing, I think calories and macros are a great place to start. And, we give a nutrition 101 seminar, which anyone's interested in having a stand, let us know as well. But we always start with those basics of that. And it is about like, okay, what are calories and what are macros, and defining them so that people understand them. Because at one point in a time, and constantly, right, and then kind of switching between, all the macros have been demonized at one point. Like fat's made you fat, and you shouldn't eat carbs, and protein's just for bodybuilders, and you should be eating less than, as little as you can, like those kind of restrictive setup diets. So I think that particularly carbs and fats, I think we're going to deep dive into a little bit and understand that, it's more about the amount than the actual carbohydrate or the fat itself, right? And again, context is very important, and we need to be careful when we're looking at supposed rules that we're not using relative terms, right? So what's like high fat or low fat, or high protein or low protein? Well, what does that actually mean? What are we using as a relative base, So we'll definitely go through the macro associated, but also the micro associated, things like sodium, and salt, and whether or not it's these good or bad. Well, what does that mean? Again, and kind of just providing a little bit more context to that. So I think even just we've only got a month, Max. It's going to be a hell of a month.
I know.
There's a lot of myths out there.
Well, hopefully it's something that we can highlight this month, but that, all of our community members and followers and everything like that will understand that this is something that will be ongoing, and they'll be able to find bits and pieces within our posts moving forward, but trying to really highlight it this month.
I think the point is too, we're not ever saying like, hey, we've busted that myth, we're done, we're moving on. But I think with like all of our content, like the idea is not to like tell you this is what it is, but it's to start the conversation, right? And when we put a post up that maybe is a quote from a podcast, or we're talking about the book club, or we're posting or doing stories and dispelling myths, whatever it is, what we're trying to do there is say, let's continue this conversation, and let's have a look at, not just this fact, but what it is about this that you find particularly scary or confronting, and how can we kind of circumvent that or rewire that and work through that, so that this particular piece of information is no longer like an obstacle or a challenge for you, because you understand it and its application, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. So what were some of the best ones, or your favorite ones, that you got from that Instagram story that you did?
I had some like flashback moments, like during that, of like, back to like young Ben, early 20s, plenty of like biceps and chest, but like not very healthy. It was a lot to do. Supplements are a really big one that come up all the time. And again, context matters, but we see a lot of people that have these big gaping holes in their diet that are super like concerned about like what supplements and stuff that they should be taking. It's like, bigger picture things here to be focusing on for sure. Supplements obviously in particular, Mags, my disdain for shit like fat burners and stuff like that. So those are all come up.
Flashback to the car in Australia. I think we were somewhere, and Ben just went rampage on, I think it was fat burners.
It's just like there's so much of that, and it is even supplement companies taking like, so I had a question about green tea and its ability to like promote fat burn, right? The answer is like, essentially there is a little bit of evidence to support that, but the quantity of what you would need in order to actually get that like benefit is you're not going to drink that much green tea, and there's going to be way more like health detrimental effects from doing that, even if you could. So there's a lot of that, right? It's that like take that top line and then like build out a complete supplement company over it and be like, oh, we found one study that shows a correlation between green tea extract and fat burn. So here's, you know, this smoothie product. So those are the ones that always get me. I think they always get me because I feel personally triggered as when you come from that kind of weight loss background too. And I've been susceptible to all that. Like I used to take like fat burners and you're like sitting at your desk and you're like, I'm not hungry. And you're having heart palpitations and you're shaking because you're so stimmed to try to control the appetite. So I think when I see that sort of stuff, I do get quite triggered, and it is kind of like a personal vendetta to stop people going down that path, right? And if you're going to spend $250 a month on supplements, like come and spend $150, you know, $200, and do a couple of months with MTMM, and you won't need the subs, you know? So we'll definitely deep dive into some of those. What other ones did I get that were really good? A lot of like nutrient timing questions as well, which I really enjoy, because to me that shows that people are thinking a little bit more about it. You know, carbs at night and that sort of stuff that we'll definitely touch on, and again, very contextual. So those are probably my favorite ones. But I think the thing that pleased me the most about that kind of Instagram Q&A and that being the catalyst for this is people do have a willingness to ask. And that's what we really want to capitalize on here, is if we give people the platform and you know, the space to kind of ask those questions, whether it be anonymous or not, you know, that obviously they're interested enough to want to ask the question. It's obviously something that they've been thinking about or that concerns them. So awesome. That is step one, right? We talked about self-awareness like last month. This is step one of that, is having that courage to say, like, I'm going to ask for help because I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, or I've been doing this for a while and I'm not really getting the results that I expected to get. Maybe it is time to ask the question about whether I'm doing this correctly or whether this is just complete bullshit, right? So I think that is really the point of this month, is to create a forum where we can have that space and start having those conversations.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was first getting into the fitness world, and I did my first like diet, or started paying attention to my diet in general. I avoided carbs completely, but ate lots of fruit. In my head, avoiding carbs, but I ate so much fruit because I don't think I knew that they were a carb, and B, just always thought that, you know, the more fruit the better, the more fruit the better. So that's, you know, kind of if we're going a step backwards from like meal timing and supplements and stuff like that, I think that's a really good place to start, you know, educating and dispelling those types of myths around carbohydrates, because I was afraid of them for a long time after that. And I know I've met a lot of clients who are too, and it's a journey and a process to kind of reintegrate them back into one's diet, while educating along the way. So I think that's one that's near and dear to my heart.
It's almost a trauma, right? Like it's almost like something, especially like carbs, and we've all been there, right? Which is why we're having the conversation. But I mean, even now, sometimes like you'll give me my profile, and like that first kind of look of like seeing, you know, 350 or 400 grams of carbohydrate, which like given training volumes might not be very much, but it's like, whoa. You know, and then this is what we do for a living, and we still sometimes have those like old rhetorics going on. So it's, again, it's not necessarily issues that we're going to solve in you know, a month, but hopefully we can start the process of that kind of examination and working through and begin that process down that path of resolving a lot of that kind of tension, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know one of my favorite things to do is when working with a client who is coming from, you know, that background where they are very carb restrictive and have that fear of carbohydrates, is just very slowly, week after week, kind of building on their carb intake, and, you know, 3-6 months later being like, hey, can we just take a peek back at what your initial profile was compared to what it is now, and seeing that, and it's just like, wow, like my body's responded so well, my, you know, performance has improved so much, I feel so good. And there was never that fear because we were never making them feel overly uncomfortable with like a drastic shift, right? So I just love seeing those reactions.
I think we'll probably do a lot on name diet protocols too, like have a look at keto and stuff like that, because I think there's a lot of people out there who basically cut primary carbohydrate, so they don't eat grains or starch, but they'll still drink and eat fruit, and it's just like, I'm doing keto. It's like, well, but what does that mean to you? Like, you know. So I think we'll have a look at those. And I also know Kat's keen to explore the kind of the difference and discrepancy between things like RDA recommendations and a little bit more in line with what we would recommend and why. Because I think that kind of conflicting information from, you know, highly regarded associations, when that kind of comes into the mix as well, and it's counter to what like a lot of other information is saying, that again is that like, well, what do I do? Like, what's right?
Yeah.
Why don't we agree on everything, right? So yeah, we'll have a look at those and again provide context to that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there's always that fear that you're doing something wrong or you're not doing something optimal enough, right? And if people are going to start really putting in effort in terms of what they're putting in their body and how they're feeling themselves and performing and everything like that, you know, you want to be confident that you're making the best decisions possible, without that kind of fear that, you know, maybe you're doing something wrong. So it can be a really strong, overpowering fear.
Diet is interesting because people identify, you know, they almost take their diet as part of their identity, like they do their religion or their politics, you know. And what happens when we do that is we become a little bit closed-minded as to like being presented with like, oh, maybe that's not the best course or way forward. And it's like, how do you, if you've always identified as keto and your Instagram handle is keto girl 143 or keto John, like who are you if all of a sudden we realize that keto is like not what you've been espousing it for, and maybe there are easier and more sustainable ways to actually get you to achieve your goals, right? That's quite a difficult conversation to have. Ironically, what we tend to see is the people that have the least amount of knowledge, even though they know they don't really know what they're talking about, but they'll defend their position to the death. Like, why? Like, if your diet is making you miserable and antisocial, like maybe that's something that we should explore, you know?
Yeah.
Again, it's not my job to say this is the perfect way to do it, but it is our job to provide the information and say, have you considered all these alternatives, which may be more practical, more sustainable, and easier, you know, application to achieve the goal that you're after. If ultimately your goal is not to be keto, but to achieve X, Y, Z, right? I think,
yeah.
There's a few in there that could be subbed in for that term.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited for this month and everything that's to come, not just this month, but afterwards as well. Really excited to hear everybody's questions, everybody's input. If you do have anything to add that you would like us to kind of dig in a bit deeper to later this month, do let us know. And of course, if you want to have a chat with any one of the MTMM coaches about anything a little bit more specifically or specific to you, we are happy to do so.
And again, if you want to ask that question and you want to remain anonymous about that question, that's fine too. And I think probably the best place to collate those is, you know, if you're within the community, feel free to message your coach, or if, you know, you're following us and part of our Instagram audience, like just throw a DM to the page and we'll break it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not going to be announcing any names or anything like that. That's for sure, unless you want to be. Unless you want your name to be shared, or send us an email too. It's just our first names at marriedtomymacros.com. If you feel more comfortable doing that. So yeah. Beautiful. Any last minute thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I'm pretty excited. I think it's actually, you know, really good. And coincidentally, really, like, we like to take credit for a lot of the smart strategic moves we make here, Mags, but I think that having this follow up what our last month in terms of like self-awareness was, and if we've had people asking questions of themselves, I think this is a really good next step to that point where it's like, if we're talking about being mindful and working to be more open-minded, this is a really good way to follow it up, right? So
yeah, so don't be afraid to ask those questions. We're not going to make anybody feel like crap for whatever they do believe or do think is right or are unsure of. That's for sure. You know, we've all been there, even as coaches ourselves. So, and we're still learning today. That's for sure too.
Exactly right. And I think too, it's always nice when people do ask questions and it might have been a question you asked, because you realize that it's not like you're the only person in the world that doesn't understand a concept or is struggling with a particular, you know, principle or whatever it is, or doesn't understand X, Y, Z. So to encourage people to ask questions, because you never know who might be too shy to ask the same question you have, and you've done them a huge favor, right?
Yeah. it'd be cool to do a follow-up at the end of this month and be like, hey, so coaches, what did you learn?
Yeah.
So send us in some questions so that, we're forced to do a little bit of extra research and things on topics that we might not be overly certain about too.
And I think if we maybe do see that we get one or two specific questions a lot, which I have a feeling there might be a few topics that stand out more than others, we might do a full coaches chat on and just kind of address those particular questions.
Yeah, I'm excited. This might have to be a 3-month situation. We'll see.
Well, I guess like we've been trying to dispel myths for the last 5 years, so like why would we stop now?
Exactly. Yeah. Excellent. Well, very much looking forward to it. And yeah, looking forward to everyone's questions and input. And thanks, Ben, for this chat.
Thank you, Mags.